Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Teachers on Fire Roundtable, conversations that will warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your professional practice. My name is Tim Cavey. I'm an 8th grade teacher, assistant principal, and the host of the Teachers on Fire podcast. I'm joined this morning by some wonderful guests, and we're talking about instructional coaching. Instructional coaching. What does instructional coaching look like? What are some of the challenges we face, the wins we experience, and best practices going forward? So I'm going to start by asking my guests to introduce themselves. Who are you? And give us a little bit of a sense of your current coaching context. Starting with you, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Johnson. So I am an innovation coach from the Halton District School Board. So that is in Burlington, Ontario, Canada, kind of just west of Toronto. It is my first year in a coaching role, so I'm pretty new to this. But before that, I'm a secondary chemistry teacher, and I was also a program lead for our science and IT department. So I'm coming with a lot of classroom experience. And I'm also actually a pretty active podcaster as well. So I co-host the EduGals podcast. And so in terms of my coaching context, we're all virtual this year in terms of coaching. Like, really, we want to get into classrooms working with teachers one-on-one, but it's not a possibility this year. So we are doing everything virtually. It's kind of been tough, right? It's a lot of work to build up a program. And I think it's probably more work this year being virtual than it would be face-to-face. I mean, I don't really know any different though. So it's been interesting, the fact that we are virtual, but then at the same time, it's kind of also opened some really cool doors. So we've been working with people outside of our board, like independent schools, even people from the States, the UK. So like it really has kind of opened up the possibilities of what if, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. That's me.
Absolutely. Yeah, welcome here. And you touched on something already that I think we're going to come back to, and that is how do you do instructional coaching in the online spaces? Kathy, over to you.
Oh, well, hello, and thank you so much for the invite, Tim. This is exciting to get together with a new group, except I know Dan from other things. So I'm Kathy Perret. I'm based out of Sioux City, Iowa. I have been in the field of education for 37 years. I was a classroom teacher and a consultant at an area education agency, in which my role then focused on a lot of things. I mean, I was a reading consultant, I was a reading coach, I was a school improvement consultant, I was an ESL consultant. The hat just kept shifting because the needs kept shifting. But about 15 years ago, we then turned into instructional coaches, and I finally found where my passion lied, and that I was kind of a coach all along. I was always that mentor teacher and hosted student teachers and so forth. So on the side at that agency, I started shifting into my own work, virtually coaching coaches, which I find unique now that now we're virtually coaching teachers. And so I've been doing the virtual thing for probably about 6 years, virtually coaching instructional coaches, because I feel like they need a coach too. And they deserve a coach and that ongoing support. In addition to that, I'm a co-author of The Coach Approach to School Leadership with Jessica Johnson and Cheryl Leibowitz. And I have a new book coming out in June, written with co-author Kenny McGee, who was a high school coach in North Carolina. And to end that, I like to support coaches in as many ways as I can. In 2011, when I was starting out as a coach, and on Twitter, I wanted to find a community of coaches to be linked with, and I couldn't find one. And so I just started one, just like many of you podcasters do. You want to bring that community in. And so and with Jessica Johnson and Cheryl Leibowitz, we started the EduCoach chat, which happens Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm now joined by a group of wonderful co-moderators that keep us running. We have lately we've been having guests on. So we've got a lot of especially the new and up and coming authors in coaching have been highlighted, just because as one, I like to build up from that. So that's me.
Very cool. Well, we've got a lot of instructional coaches here, and we've got a coach of coaches, which is fantastic. And I did not know about the EduCoach Twitter chat, so thanks for letting us know about that. Daryl, I'm so excited to have a local connection on the show this morning. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Great to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Daryl DeBoer, and as Tim mentions, I'm local to him. I am living in British Columbia, Canada, where I am the director of learning for a pre-K to 12 school of about 1,300 students, Surrey Christian School. So my role in terms of instructional coaching at Surrey Christian School is actually a little bit of coaching the coaches. So we've been on a journey for the last couple of years to create a culture of coaching at Surrey Christian School. So we're multi-campus, but we want to be on about the same things. We want to have the same language. We want to, like, as you go from grade 4 to grade 5 as a student, or from one campus to the other campus, we're trying to build a level of consistency. So the role of instructional coaches working with teachers is an important part of that hope. The other hat that I wear is I'm the director of Teaching for Transformation, and Teaching for Transformation is a framework for equipping teachers to design learning that invites students into community participation. Language we'll use is students engaged in real work that meets real needs for real people. So Teaching for Transformation, actually, Kathy, isn't housed too far from you. It's actually housed at Sioux Center, Iowa, through Dordt University.
Yes, yep, okay.
So even though I live here in Canada, I actually do a lot of work with the TFT network. So we're about 60 schools strong in the US. And part of that journey, we partner with schools on a multi-year implementation where we're doing pretty intense professional development for over 3 years with the school. And during that journey, during those 3 years, one of the important facets is building up the culture and equipping the schools in instructional coaching. So a bit of the coaching the coaches, but then also creating the network and structure for instructional coaching throughout the TFT network of schools.
Very cool. Thanks, Daryl. Victoria, welcome back after a great show last week. You're back for more. Why don't you introduce yourself and talk about your role in coaching?
Yes, thank you. So hi, everybody. I'm Victoria Thompson, and I'm based out of Tacoma, Washington, which is a suburb-ish of Seattle, Washington. And my specific role is it's kind of long. It's a STEM integration transformation coach. I just call myself a STEM coach. It just makes it a little easier. But my role is a bit unique because I focus on instructional coaching, but specifically with STEM. So that's science, technology, engineering, and math. I work at a school that is one of only 2 co-managed schools in Washington State. So what we do, we have a public-private partnership. I work for the private nonprofit part, and then I also work with a district instructional coach who mostly focuses on humanities instruction. So he and I tangentially work together just to, uplift curriculum in our school. But my specific role really does focus on that STEM. And what's great is that STEM can be anywhere. It could be in PE, it can be in humanities, it can be in Korean, right, or art. It can be in lots of different places. So most of my job roles and duties focus on integrating project-based learning into classrooms, making sure that students are familiar with inquiry models that are kind of inherent to STEM, making sure that students and teachers are comfortable with educational technology, which has been a big part of my role because my district has been 100% remote since March. And then also, of course, just forming those connections with teachers and collaborating with lessons, collaborating on activities, co-teaching, right? Or sometimes even just taking a load off of something that a teacher wants to do, right? Hey, you want me to co-facilitate a breakout room? I'll do that. You want me to overlook this lesson for you? I'll do that, right? You want me to help this small group of students? I'll do that. So it's a little bit of everything. But I love it because it's such a specialized role with STEM, and STEM is my background. I come from 6 through 12, primarily math and science, and then a little bit of tech consulting as well. So it's great, and I love it.
All right, Victoria, that seals it. I think once I get around to another show on STEM, I'm going to have you back
Yes.
again. That's all there is to it. Dr. Dan, you and I have been working together virtually for quite a while. We actually did meet once in person. Tell us about your role, which I know is sort of evolving recently as well.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tim, for having me on here and among such an esteemed panel of coaches. It's awesome. I'm Dan Kreines. I'm an instructional coach in Connecticut, and this is my 15th year in education. And I think I'm getting to the point at which I've been coaching just as long, if not longer, than being a classroom teacher. It's, Kathy mentioned the word passion before. I definitely have felt more and more throughout my career the passion for working with the adult learners more so than the student learners. So I've been coaching for a while between the states of Connecticut and New York. And as you mentioned, most recently, I've sort of moved out of a building-based coach where I was more of a literacy coach. Like Victoria mentioned, she's a STEM coach. I was sort of the opposite. I was that humanities type of a coach. But now, similar to Rachel, I'm in a role as a instructional coach for digital learning. And she used the word innovation before. I love to use that word as well. We are not virtual. Well, a lot of our students are virtual, but we're also in a hybrid model. So many of our students are in person and our teachers are certainly in person. So I don't have to deal with that virtual coaching so much. But of course, no matter what school looks like for anyone these days, digital learning and innovative teaching techniques have certainly been ramped up over the past almost year now. And that's kind of where I come in this newly formed team in my district. It's now more of a district level coaching role that includes a mutual friend of ours, Tim, Jeff Bradbury from TeacherCast podcast. So, really getting to enjoy working with him and our new team. It's been a great start so far. And I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that I am a podcaster and I host the Leader of Learning podcast. And we are just about next week, as a matter of fact, to approach our 100th episode after 3.5 years. Thank you so much. Kathy's been a guest before. She and I have been kind of collaborating in some ways with the hashtag and the Twitter chat and even the Voxer group a little bit, although it's not necessarily the most active at times. So it's been a lot of fun, though. Like I said, that passion for working with the adult learners and really getting to coach teachers on honing and improving their craft.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's great to have you. And you're right. What an incredible panel we have here. I know the time is going to fly. I want to get right into the questions. But first of all, we do have a handful of viewers on the live play right now. So welcome. Let us know where you're watching from this morning and what is your experience with instructional coaching. I want to kick this second round of questions off with a brief personal anecdote. And that is that as of a couple of years ago, I was teaching in the classroom and I hadn't really had a personal professional experience with instructional coaching. And so when I was approached about, hey, would you like to have a coach for a cycle? At first, I wasn't sure what to expect. And, I had some of those suspicions or that defensiveness. And sometimes your teachers wonder what it's going to be like having professional eyes in the classroom sort of examining your every move at every moment. And that's sort of the vision that you have. Fast forward to the end of the experience, it was wonderful. It was amazing. And my coach really made me feel safe. She really gave me a lot to think about in my practice. And I felt like I had a teammate. I felt like I had a partner in the classroom. So my understanding of instructional coaching completely changed. I want to talk about this question. Why should schools and districts make this investment? Schools and districts always face tight budgets, always. And so with so many decisions to make about programming, why should they make the investment in these salaried positions? I'll go back to you, Dr. Dan. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. Coaching is so different from any other type of professional development in the fact that it's really, job embedded and an ongoing process. I think sometimes coaching cycles may come in waves. And when I say coaching cycles, I mean 4 to 6 or 8 week cycles where a teacher and a coach are working somewhat intimately together with one another, like Tim, it seems like was in your case. But it's not that one and done professional development session where it's being led by potentially an outside consultant or some other expert who may even be in the district. These are people whose roles are completely, solely dedicated to improving teachers and meeting them where they're at, both like physically and also in terms of their skill set and their knowledge and their experience. And so having someone who is in the trenches with them, so to speak, is very different from outsiders coming in. And so I think, really, to get back to the question of the investment, certainly it's an investment, maybe more in the human resources than any other type of resource. But it is valuable, I believe, in the sense that for a teacher to have someone who is more, quote unquote, on their side than that one-off professional development session that just happens once and it's over and you're just left on your own to figure things out. This is that ongoing process where those interactions between a teacher and a coach can continue to happen, and the coach can continue to work with that teacher to help focus in on their goals for their students. Student outcomes are always the end goal for everything that happens in education. So what is it that we want to get out of our students, and how can I, as the coach, help you, the teacher, reflect on what you're doing and how it's working to get your students there?
Thanks, Dan. I want to say hi to Lisa, Jenna, Tim, Donovan, and others. Thank you so much for joining us here in the comments. Yeah, great thoughts there. I love that idea that, the coach is in the building, so that relationship is going to continue even after a coaching cycle. Those conversations can continue to happen. I don't think we'll make our way all the way around here because the next question is sort of related. I think there's going to be some overlap. But Victoria, how would you make this pitch to a principal or district starting to look at coaching as a possible investment?
Well, I'd actually turn it back around on the principal and the district and, kind of look at this and say, as a principal, as an administrator, you are so many degrees removed from what a classroom teacher does every single day. And I don't say that to be callous or rude or mean, but that's just the unfortunate reality. My administrators, every single one I've worked with, and I've always been in an environment where there has been instructional coaching, they've got so many things they have to do on a day-to-day basis. Meeting with teachers and actually putting them through a coaching model, even simple things like observations and visits, that's really tough for them to squeeze in, to the point where sometimes when I look at observation forms, one of the time, slots or minutes is 5 minutes. How can you do, a meaningful visit or observation in a 5-minute time frame? How do you know what the learning target is? How do you know, if the students are engaged? How can you also see what the teacher is going to do? But sometimes 5 minutes is literally all they have. And that's really tough, right? So that instructional coach kind of spot, that's going to be that middleman where the administrator can take care of the administration duties and still come in, when they can. But the instructional coach is able to meaningfully implement coaching cycles, coaching models, and really make sure that students and teachers are on the same page whenever they walk into a class. That's time that the instructional coach has that sometimes an administrator just doesn't. And again, not to be callous or rude or mean, but that's the unfortunate reality of what we have. So when I say investing in instructional coaching, you have somebody that not only advocates for teachers, but can also go to administration when applicable and say, okay, well, for example, if I look at 6th grade and if I observe 6th grade, and maybe I'm seeing a need in ed tech usage, right? Maybe the ed tech usage is just basic baseline delivery, but if the school has a goal that they want to hike it up, for the SEMR model, right now we're kind of at substitution. We want to go up to augmentation. That's data that I can bring to my principal, and then we can brainstorm solutions to work together. Everything that I do as a coach is confidential, so I don't leak names or anything. Like, that's just part of something that I do. But I can say, hey, across the board as a school, this is a need that I'm seeing. And then I can also work with teachers and figure out their needs as well. So it's a bit of a two-way street, right? I help the school, but I also help the teachers. So my best pitch is that the instructional coach is a great middleman or middlewoman in my case, where we can go between administration and the teachers and we just solve problems. We're problem solvers, and that's what we do.
Right, right. So much there. One of the things I take away is that I need to look at the SAMR model again. But
Yes.
but you're right. And that last part, that last thing you said, I think again is so important for teachers to understand the nature of that relationship, because as you say, you're going between teachers and admins.
Right.
And so teachers want to know that they are safe, that they're not being, critiqued at every moment. But I think that was really well put. Continuing on, I want to also talk about, and again, these two questions sort of bleed into each other. So again, why make that investment? But also, let's start to talk about what are some specific wins you've seen for teachers and by extension for learners that have come as a result of coaching work. So have you got a story to share, or maybe, you might want to just speak in more general terms. What are some of the school-wide or system-wide wins that you've seen, Daryl?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Well, if I think about actually just a scenario yesterday at our school, as I mentioned earlier, we're on about this language of real work meeting real needs for real people. And so I encountered one of our phys ed teachers yesterday emerging from a coaching session, and he was flying high. He was in the office area. He was pumped because he had just left his coaching session in which he was walking out with, okay, I now know where I'm going with this in PE, and he's going to invite his students into creating a recreational activity book for our staff to implement in a structure we call CREW. And CREW is when we come together every morning with our students, and creates a sense of belonging, and you are known. And one of the activities we do within CREW is actually engaging our group of 15 students in some sort of fun initiative or something like that. So because the the phys ed class has an emphasis on recreation, he's going to invite his students in creating this resource that we need as a staff. And he was pumped. So he went into the coaching session uncertain. He wants to do the right thing. And I think that's the beauty of coaching. I actually think instructional coaching is it's a real way of care. So why should a school have instructional coaches? It's actually an act of care for your staff, because we're inviting them to think about things in a certain way, and we need to ensure we have the right support in place. So I think instructional coaching is this act of care. This teacher is walking away empowered. This teacher is walking away with direction in a way, and this is going to impact both us as a school, but also these kids in this classroom.
That is so rich, Daryl. I go back to this comment from Christopher Holmes over on LinkedIn. He says, an investment in an instructional coach is evidence of a leader's value in teachers and quality instruction. And Daryl, it makes me think we have a mutual connection here. Darren Speaksma, who tweeted yesterday about our students' attitude toward assessment. What if students actually look forward to assessment as this is going to be a tool that's going to help me take my next step? And I hear some echoes of that idea here in the instructional coaching space. Not that instructional coaches are, that's not their job necessarily to assess, but there are some echoes for sure. Kathy, what are some of the wins you've seen for teachers? I love Daryl's story just from yesterday. I believe you said, Daryl. Kathy, I'm sure you have many as well. What can you share with us?
And I have stories from teachers and coaches. I'll go back to your second question quick first. I mean, we know that there's a return on investment with coaching. Early in my career, I had the privilege to learn from Bev Showers directly. She came to Iowa and worked with us. And if you're a coach and you've seen the chart that talks about they studied theory, demonstration, practice, and feedback and coaching to see what got teachers' knowledge, skills, and then transfer into the classroom. And it wasn't until they added coaching that they got the transfer into the classroom. When they combined the four, they got a 0.68 effect size, but when they added coaching, the transfer quadrupled. So schools are investing in PD and curriculum and approaches and innovation and transformation, and they're putting all their energy in this stuff, but then they don't see the return without the coaching. As far as a teacher, last year I was virtually coaching a teacher. She was in Florida. I was in Iowa. I go with where the teacher's at, what their goals are, what they want to see happen in their classroom. her goals to me seem like it maybe was low level goal, but I just went with it. I'm like, this is where she's at. I've got to read her. I've got to peel back the layers. So we took a 6-week cycle. We've met one-on-one virtually once a week. And in that 6 weeks time, she went from nervous, scared, not sure what to do, routines not really working right, to a person who said, well, now I want another coaching cycle, but I want to work on this. And it went to student learning. So she had to first feel the benefits of coaching herself. She's going to go in with a lower level goal, and that's okay. I've got coaches that are the same. When I work with coaches one-on-one, I ask them to do 2 things, and it's not anything we ever talk about, but I want them to keep track of 2 things. I want them to keep track of their gratitude each day, and I want to have their mindset always thinking in that form of gratitude, even if it's like, it's hard to work with teachers or they're so resistant. Switch that over to a gratitude. I am making an impact with teachers that I don't even know yet. And then I ask them to collect their small wins. And each day, just jot down your small wins. What happened that day that was a win for you? And then over time, start to analyze that yourself. And they have gained confidence. They have gained the knowledge and skills that then they are implementing back into their coaching cycles. Because I feel like coaches are stuck in the same thing. They may have theory, demonstration, practice, and feedback, but until they get job embedded coaching themselves, the transfer isn't happening. So in my work, those are the things I love to see, is when the coach is actually then getting to get into the teacher's classroom and do the coaching.
That's a beautiful thing when teachers are actually hungry for that next cycle. Then you know you're really winning, right? And this investment is starting to pay off. Dr. Rachel, what would you add in terms of wins? And I also want to start to poke at the idea of, how to overcome this idea that maybe in schools, when the idea of instructional coaching is first floated, is there a little bit of pushback from teachers as if, like, what are you saying? We need coaching? We need, are you saying we're a mess? What does that say about how you view our professionalism? But first of all, the wins. Have you got a win that you can share with us?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a pretty new coach. So I've been working one-on-one with teachers only for the past couple of months, but I've seen some really big wins. And I think I'm going to echo what everyone else has been saying here, in that you really need to meet those teachers where they're at. So starting with where they're, at their starting place. And then in terms of the work I do through innovation, it's around knowing like innovation is an improvement to a process, product, or understanding. So trying to tease out what that problem is and how can we improve it and what strategies can we take. So knowing that innovation is individual to every single teacher, what might be innovative to one could be old hat to another. So just keeping all of those sort of things in mind. But in terms of big wins, I think like I recently worked with a teacher who wanted to introduce more problem solving and authentic kind of learning experiences for his students in his chemistry classroom virtually. And so we kind of went through the process of implementing thinking classroom style problem solving. And he never really thought about bringing that into a context in a science classroom, because pretty traditionally it's used just in math classrooms. But I think meeting him where he was at and helping him through implementing that strategy, he saw success. And that's sort of a big thing, right? Is that they get to experience that success and that you celebrate that success with them, because then it has this like huge ripple effect through the rest of the system. So, not only is he doing this now, but then his course team is also sort of implementing these strategies as well. So yeah, like really meeting them where they're at, I think is like absolutely key.
Well said. And yes, again, I mean, that theme is going to continue to come up, that I think teachers have to know that we're on side with them, that we're working with them for their good. I want to talk about challenges, and we can't approach this topic and really do it justice without speaking to some of the obstacles. And I've already mentioned some of the maybe misperceptions that are out there, but in your mind, what are the most difficult challenges in this space, and what can coaches do proactively to solve them? And I guess when we're talking about coaches, it goes right up to people like Daryl, directors of learning for schools and systems, and to people higher up as well. What needs to be put in place to overcome some of these challenges? Dan, let's go back to you. What do you think are some of the key obstacles that we face when we try to implement coaching programs?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tim. As you know, but for the panelists here and for the viewers and listeners, last year I completed a dissertation where I did some original research on leadership practices to inspire growth in teachers and a growth mindset. And so much of that work and what I'm about in terms of the content that I produce is trying to break down and break through teacher resistance. And so, to be honest, to answer that question before about, maybe schools and districts being uncomfortable at first introducing coaching, or certainly a classroom teacher being uncomfortable at first with striking up that relationship with a coach, so much of that comes from the dreaded comfort zone, right? It feels uncomfortable. And, I think we've become more comfortable with the phrase being uncomfortable with, or no, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And therefore, I think so much of it comes down to, we haven't quite mentioned this word yet, although I think it's been an underlying theme. It's trust. So much of what we do with teachers and schools and districts is about building that trusting relationship between them, to help them be more comfortable, right? Addressing their discomfort and breaking down that resistance to help them be more comfortable at doing what they love to do, hopefully, which is instructing their students and getting their students to learn and grow, to be as successful as they can possibly be. And our goal is to get the teacher to be as successful as they can be. So we're all on the same page. It just may take a little bit longer. We've already mentioned meeting them where they're at. Some people are going to be a little more into coaching. Some people are not. One of my biggest wins quickly was when I was told by a more veteran, seasoned teacher in a building that I was coaching in that I should not work with another teacher because I don't think they're going to really be interested in getting coached. Well, you know what? I was able to, by the end of that year, have that teacher leading some really meaningful passion projects and genius hour with her students. We actually had articles being written about some of the projects that our students were doing. I think it was 2 or maybe 3 years in a row. So that teacher who people believed would be resistant to coaching, I was able to get to a point at which she really was innovating in her classroom and getting her students to produce newspaper article worthy projects. And that was a huge win for me, for the teacher, and for the students. So getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
I like what you said about trust. Let's hold on to that idea, building that trust, which resonates again with the classroom, right? That's an instructional principle as well. Victoria, what in your mind is an important challenge that we need to, that we need to proactively plan for in this space?
So I'd say that there are two. One is professional. One is, professional just regarding to the nature of our job. And then the other is working with folks at our respective sites. The first would be, I just think that a lot of people have no clue what instructional coaches do, to the point where when I was in South Carolina, because I taught in South Carolina, taught in Washington, now I'm a coach in Washington. I remember I had a colleague tell me that the biggest waste that a district could spend is on instructional coaching. And I remember looking at her and thinking, I just don't know if I believe that. But she had always had negative experiences with instructional coaches. And then to add insult to injury, sometimes the instructional coach, no harm, no foul, but they might only work with certain folks, maybe they're assigned to certain folks. So depending on the school site that you're at, And I don't think I can speak for any of us in that realm, but, some coaches really only do work with a couple of teachers, or, maybe they only do lead PD. So what they see is what they interpret. And that's something that I've really tried hard to dismantle at my school site. I try my hardest to be as present as possible. I try my hardest to really alleviate teacher burden whenever I can. I also try my hardest to make it known that I am approachable and available, and you can come see me whenever you want. And just periodic reminders about, hey, here's a list of things that I can help you do. So please let me know if I can be of assistance to you. That way there's no line blurring, of what my role is and how I can help folks, because that was definitely something that I encountered when I first started coaching. The second thing is just, especially with regard to trust, building relationships with teachers, I found is really important and even harder in a virtual environment. As I mentioned, my district is 100% remote, and I'm a new coach. So I've only been a coach since July of 2020. So just building relationships with teachers has been very meaningful for me to build that trust. And then on top of that as well, that's where we get our wins, because when we have trust with the teacher, then we can collaborate, right? Then we can co-teach, then we can implement coaching cycles. And it feels less of a slight against maybe them personally, or perhaps their teaching style or their lesson or their activity, whatever we choose to help with the coaching cycle. It feels like a true collaborative process. And that's where I find most of my wins, where it is true collaboration, but it's because we have that trust build up. So those would be my two.
I love what you said about managing the message. There's a little bit of a PR there, or maybe that's not right, the right term, but we need to craft a narrative about what we're doing and what we're all about. Just to make sure that communication is really clear. Sometimes we can know what we're doing and what we're all about, but it's really important that our constituents understand that as well. Mm-hmm. Daryl, what are you thinking in terms of challenges in this space?
Yeah, I think Victoria and Dan have mentioned ones that I would say too, this idea of that trust piece, right? There's that, connect and then lead. Right, so that connection or relationship or trust or other words, like leading without the connection can be intimidating, actually. So connect then lead. That culture, Tim, I think you're getting at it too. One of the things we've had that we're working on, so it's present tense, not past tense, is to normalize coaching. That we all need coaches. Like it's good to have a coach. So part of the culture, I think, within a school is just to simply normalize that. So there's all teachers and all administrators to be involved in coaching. We use, this comes out of this language of the compass of shame, that when anyone in any situation feels some level like, oh, I don't do that, or, oh man, we feel some sense of, and then we can all respond differently to that. And I think it's very important that we understand and we normalize that when we're confronted with something we're not yet on about, or that it's okay to feel what we're feeling. And I think if coaches understand that and teachers understand that and we normalize that, you can move forward with it. I think it's super important for a coach to understand their own story as a learner as they enter into a coaching relationship, right? Like there's a intimacy to this coaching relationship. So as much we need to understand the teacher, and we need to understand our own story as we enter into that, because we're both going to be responding to each other, and understanding our story coming into that goes a long way to creating an open posture for the coaching process.
I like what you said about normalizing that culture of coaching. And it made me think of normalizing the culture around counseling, right? I mean, 20 years ago, there were some different stigmas and ideas around counseling, right? Like, oh, you're going to a counselor, there must be something wrong with you. And at this point, I feel like, wow, I would take counseling anytime. I love that experience, right? So between counseling, coaching, and I know, again, Dan mentioned his work around growth mindset and what that looks like. I think we need to build some of those ideas as well, just that appetite for improvement and growth. Kathy, we've already said so much good stuff here, and I thought this question might go in a negative direction, but really it is so positive. Anything to add in terms of difficult challenges before we head to advice? Oh, and let me just unmute you here. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
You're worried about my dog, aren't you? It's about understanding adult learners. And so often coaches get this role. They don't know what it is. They are sent to some training. They've gotten a book to read. And then they have to go figure it out themselves. And one of the layers that gets missed is that understanding of adult learners, and that it is slightly different than the students that they once taught. Some of the work that Kenny and I have noticed as we're writing this next book is the fact that teachers come with so many different possible barriers that break down that culture of coaching. They can lack confidence. They can feel isolated. They can be overwhelmed. They may be in a culture that isn't working or conducive to coaching. And so what we've been trying to do is put that positive spin on it and get that compassionate coaching focus, so that if you see a teacher that's overwhelmed or overloaded, what can you do to help them? And it might be that you need to help them prioritize some of their goals. If you see that teacher who is lacking confidence in using the technology tools or the STEM or whatever, what is it that they might need? Well, they might need you to partner with them closer and have that stronger partnership of modeling something in the classroom, talking through lessons, and so forth. So it comes down to kind of, again, peeling back the layers. I had a coach once, and that was kind of her terminology. She always wanted to peel back the layers to me, kind of that counseling piece of where is this person coming from, and then ways to help them understand that specific adult learner, so that then that now I never can say that word, specific adult learner can make that transformation in his or her own way.
There's that wonderful word, transformation again. Love that. Thank you, Kathy. And Dr. Rachel, as we move to you, I wonder if maybe we could switch to this next question. Sorry to put you on the spot here, but I think we've really spoken a lot to the challenges. Let's start to think about best practices. And here we want to be as specific and practical as possible. So I know you and Victoria are relatively new in this space, but what have you noticed so far? What can you pass on to other instructional coaches?
Yeah, so in terms of building a coaching program, like that is exactly what we're doing this year. Coaching hasn't really sort of like we haven't really had a culture of coaching in our board before, especially around innovation. So this question really speaks to my heart because this has been my life this year. I say you first have to focus on those relationships. Like that is absolutely key. If you don't have trust with staff, there is no way that you're going to get buy-in from your staff in order to jump onto coaching. And so I would say like that is where we've really centered a lot of our work in terms of beginning. So understanding where the pain points are with our staff and where they need help and where we can be just basically that extra set of hands, right? Especially this year with everything that's going on. So we did things like big surveys, and we spent the entire first quadmester sharing out community builder activities that teachers could just like take, grab, and use in their classroom. We, one of the coaches I work with, his analogy is we were like those people at the water stations in a marathon, like pulling the cups out. And as teachers are whizzing by, right, we're like, here, take this. But by doing that, we have built those strong relationships. And so I would say that's key. Also thinking about your marketing, like creating that culture of coaching and what is coaching. So building coaching menus and building your presence on social media and just trying to connect as many possible ways as you can.
I love the metaphor of the water station, and hopefully that's the kind of presence a good coach can bring to a teacher, right? It's just that cup of cold water. What else can we offer in terms of, I do want to shout out my beautiful wife who just chimed in. So thank you, honey, for offering that comment about growth mindset, continuous improvement. I've sold her on Carol Dweck. She's on board the growth mindset train. Victoria, I'll switch over to you here. again, best practices, advice. I know we're sort of speaking to coaches and at the school or district level, but what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I'd have to echo exactly what Rachel said, where it's all about needs and it's all about where we can have somebody specific to those needs in order to improve the school. So like I'm a STEM coach, right? And we're a STEM PBL school. So that's why my work focuses specifically on STEM, right? On project-based learning and also on uplifting that with our teachers and our students. And then what we can do, of course, once we pinpoint that, then we begin to look at the data, right? So as a STEM PBL school, what is the inquiry inventory on teachers actually implementing PBL on a daily basis or even weekly basis? You know, what are the math scores? And I know that testing is a hot topic, but I mean, that's important. You know, if we want to do a fully fleshed PBL, I got to make sure that I'm meeting the students at the level that they're at and that I'm supporting teachers with that baseline level as well. What do science scores look like? Do we have students that are at or above grade level for certain things? And if not, what can we do to support that? And sometimes that rhetoric gets a little testy because people don't like, of course, to look at scores, or maybe they don't want to look at the data, or maybe sometimes they might not even know how to properly implement the data with what we want to do. But it always goes back to those pain points, because I think something that also gets lost in translation is that we're district employees or nonprofit employees, regardless of where we are. So our roles also get impacted by district demands, right? Nonprofit demands, all of those things. So we're trying to advance all of the goals at once. And it does seem like a bit of a daunting task. But again, that's why we have the roles that we have. So we're looking at needs for district, right? We're looking at needs for teachers. We're looking at needs for students. We're looking at our administrative needs, and we're kind of packaging it all together and figuring out what we can do to make it better.
Have any of you come across the spiral of inquiry as sort of a starting point for this sort of a journey? Does that sound familiar? I see a few.
So we use, because we're a PBL school, we use the PBL wheel, which is very similar to the spiral of inquiry, but that's specifically what I use.
You talked, Victoria, about sort of relying on the evidence and looking at the evidence. And George Couros sort of critiques the term data-driven. He doesn't like that term.
Right, yeah.
I can't remember why, but I think that's the subtle shift, right? We don't want to be driven by numbers because that brings in all kinds of cultural problems, but we do need evidence. So we don't want to end a coaching cycle just saying, well, that teacher feels good.
Right.
Right.
Well, and the best part too is that there's lots of different types of evidence. So I might start with district scores or maybe school scores, and then I'll go to individual teachers and we can get anecdotal data, right? Okay, well, these kids didn't have lunch that day, or, oh, well, there was a fire drill in the middle of the test. And, that's why we had to leave and come back and folks were shaken up. There's a lot of things that go on in schools. So I guess another point is don't just rely on one set of data, because there's a lot that you can pull from teachers, right? And from students as well. We have a student feedback cycle that we implement in our school where they also give feedback on lessons and what they'd like to see improved, which has been very powerful for us and also for me as a coach.
Awesome. We are starting to run short on time, but Kathy and Daryl, you're at the higher level on this thing. So I want to make sure to hear from you on this question. Kathy, what advice would you offer to a school or district looking to build a coaching program?
Well, it goes back to what Rachel and Victoria have already said as far as building those relationships. I'll give you an analogy. I'm from Iowa, and of course we have the famous movie Field of Dreams, and the line of build it and he will come, or it gets revised to build it and they will come. And a lot of times coaching programs, unfortunately, get built behind closed doors. The administrator feels like they need the coach, or the school district, whatever. They hire the person, they send them off to training. But then there's that misconception about what coaching is, because the coach themselves doesn't even know what coaching is after one training or one book read. And so coming back with that mindset of building this coaching program together and not just building it behind closed doors. So what are the needs of teachers? Seek them out, have those individual conversations with them. It all goes back to building those relationships and building that trust. Have mini cycles. I think coaches have way too much on their plate, and that gets to the misconception, because now that coach is the PD person or the data cruncher or the this or the that, and they don't truly get the coaching cycles. And so it goes back to that research. If we're not coaching, we're not going to see that transfer into the classroom. The other piece is that coaches, I don't think, are supported enough. They get sent to a training, they get a box of books to read, and they typically have to figure this job out themselves. And so, as Daryl mentioned, everybody deserves a coach. Steve Barkley talks about the coach should be the most coached person in the school. And chances are the teachers or the teachers turned coach have never received coaching as a teacher. And so they don't truly know what that transformation looks like. They hear that word, they think it's out there, but they've never even received it themselves. And so to get those coaches coaching, not just network meetings, not just book studies, but true coaching so that they can feel the impact, is then, I think, going to solve quite a few of the challenges that they see, because they're really, a lot of times they're just not coaching. They're doing all this other work. And Jim Knight and I had a conversation once. If all that work is important, great, it's good work, call it something else, then I'm a coach. If you're a coach, Diane Sweeney has a great blog on hers, like getting to 60%. Get coaching cycles in if you're a coach. If you're not doing the coaching cycles, then just reframe the job title so that coaching then doesn't get a misconception.
Right. That's we need to be really clear about the job description here. Daryl and Dan, I do want to get to the reading round because I love adding books to my Kindle that are going to be helpful in this space. But do you have something short and sweet to share with us in terms of your advice from building programs so far? Daryl, what comes to mind for you?
I think, in building on what Kathy said there, the transparency of what coaching is and the consistency. So, what we're discovering is, in the culture of coaching, or as you build a culture of coaching, we want the coaches to be using the same approaches and the same tools. And that consistency in structure is actually leads to transparency, which leads to trust. And then also the tools that you use need to have a simplicity to them. So yeah, for building coaching culture, to be very clear about what a coaching cycle looks like, what the tools are going to be used, consistency, because even staff come in with a different conception of what coaching could look like, and the tools and the structuring actually just creates consistency. And I think that's very important.
Great point. I'm sure you feel like you need to write some policy and some guides or common language, right? And then Dan, over to you. Anything last to add on this? Like, what's got to be there in the coaching program?
Yeah, I think so much of what's been said already, and I'm not going to repeat that, but I just wanted to add this for schools and districts who are new to coaching or considering coaching, is to just consider who you're putting in coaching roles. My advice would be, do not put just the teacher who's been a good teacher or has been a teacher for a long time at your school in a coaching role. You need to put someone in there who understands and can really help and affect, and again, that word, transform the teaching practices of the adult learners in the building. I think we can all point to examples, not necessarily personally with us, but times that we've seen or people that we know who have been launched, let's say, into a coaching role just because they've been at a school a long time. They're, higher on the pecking order, or, they have priority or seniority. Sometimes that doesn't work out. You really need to look at people who, as we talked, Kathy mentioned before, and I said again, like, have that passion for supporting the adult learners and helping them through their teaching practices and teaching challenges.
Thank you so much, Dan. Amazing note to end on, or to end that round on, I should say. As I mentioned, I do want to talk about this question. Who are the authors or voices that you've learned from in the coaching space? I think it was Kathy that said the coach should be coached more than anyone, which is really fun to think about. So very quickly, sort of as a lightning round, I think I know the book that Dan will drop here, or if he does drop a book, but we'll see if I'm right about that. Rachel, I'll go back to you. What's a book or a voice or a podcast that you're paying attention to in this space?
So I would say like the biggest thing that's really helped me this year is in the summer, I worked through the Google Certified Coaching Curriculum, which is excellent. It's based on a challenge-based coaching cycle. So I would recommend that. And I've also been part of the professional learning network called Google EC Open Chat. And that has supported me in so many ways. Like we even did a book study with Courageous Adventures by Jenny McGeera. So I think those are the two things that I would really highly recommend.
I will make sure to include those on the blog post. Thank you so much. Kathy, what about you?
Oh, I have a list, but I won't go through it. I mean, of course, it goes back to my beginnings with Joelle and Killian and Jim Knight. I mean, those books and Steve Barkley and all the ones, great minds that have been giving us so much on coaching. I direct people over to the EduCoach chat every third Wednesday of the month. We actually have a special guest and who are authors. Recently, we've had Sherry St. Clair. She's written the book Coaching Redefined. We had Lindsay Deacon and Angela Harkness, and they've written the EduCoach Survival Guide. We've had Jim Thompson and Casey, I'm going to get his name wrong, Kozirek. They've written a guide to video coaching. Stephanie Affinito, she's written a digital tools literacy coaching. So we try to highlight some of those up and coming authors of coaching so that they can get the bandwidth too and share their work.
Thank you so much. And Daryl, one or two voices that you are listening to in this space?
Yeah, maybe I'll come at this from a different angle. The International Institute of Restorative Practices just have many frameworks about how do we work with people, what does fair process look like, and so lovely ideas that are extremely applicable to the coaching relationship.
Awesome. And Victoria?
Yeah, so right now I'm reading Student-Centered Coaching, The Moves. That's like the full title. And it's Diane Sweeney and Leanna S. Harris. And I really like it because it shifts that model from basically what we've been talking about all morning, from fixing teachers to really collaborating with them on the design process. And that's what I'm all about, with my role. And I think I'll say we're all about too, with the collaboration and making sure that teachers are being supported. So I absolutely recommend that book.
Thank you. And Dan?
All right, Tim, I'm going to probably surprise you. I'm not going to mention the one I think you're thinking that I'm going to say. Like Kathy, I think I have a list. I'm going to rattle off a few quickly and then kind of expand a little bit. The Art of Coaching, Elena Aguilar is tremendous. Of course, Jim Knight, who Kathy has referred to, has literally just the book called Instructional Coaching and so much work that he's done. I've heard him speak. He's tremendous. I do want to shout out again the EduCoach hashtag and Twitter chat. Kathy and her co-authors are voices that inspire me, that I look up to all the time. Kathy, Kenny, like everybody who's a part of that. Sherry St. Clair, again, she actually came to my district last year to do some work with our coaches across the district. She's been on my podcast. She's tremendous. And I think, Tim, when I was a guest on your show, I mentioned this book, but I want to mention it again. It's not necessarily an education book, but I think for people who are coaches or anyone who's involved in instructional and educational coaching should read it. It's called The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Smith, and it's a little bit more business oriented, but tremendous for the value it could offer to coaches in the educational space as well. That one has been really, really great for me to read and really inspirational.
That's the title I was waiting for, Dan. So there it is.
Oh, all right. There you go.
Well, we are completely out of time, but I do want to give you an opportunity to let us know where we can find you, how we can connect. So give us one or two places. I know you could probably be found in 10 or 12, but try to keep it to a very short list. And thank you to everyone for sharing your Twitter handle right here in the display. Dr. Dan, where can we find you and how can we connect?
Of course, on Twitter at the handle that you see on the screen here, at Dr._Kreiness, spelled with the E first and then the I. And the website, blog, and podcast is, again, Leader of Learning, and that can be found at leaderoflearning.com and anywhere that you listen to podcasts.
And I should say, as we continue around, do read your handle out loud for our lovely podcast listeners. Victoria, how can we connect with you?
Yes, so you can find me on Twitter. That's where I'm most active, and my Twitter handle is @VictoriaTheTech, TECH. And then that's where you can also find my website and things that I'm doing.
Thank you. Daryl.
Yeah, Twitter handle @DarylDeBoer. Another way is through teachingfortransformation.org. You get a sense of TFT, and then also you'll find my contact information there.
Great. Kathy.
Again, Twitter, Kathy Perrett. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram with that same name as well. My website, kathyperrett.org. And there was something else I say, but I can't remember what it was now.
Did you mention your book?
Coach Approach to School Leadership is already out in 2007, and the new book is Compassionate Coaching, something about breaking barriers for teachers, coming out in June of 2021.
I want to thank Tim Belmont, who's been here with us in the comments from start to finish here. Tim, great to have you. And Dr. Rachel.
Yeah, so lots of ways to connect with me on Twitter. I'm at Dr._R_Johnson. That's a mouthful, I know. You can also check out my podcast, the EduGals podcast, and everything to do with it at edugals.com. And then also my coaching work, we're at hdsb-theshift.com. We are open to having anyone come out to our events. So I'd love to see some listeners out there.
Well, I've learned a lot of new learning opportunities today. So thank you so much for sharing. For everyone, make sure you tune in to next week's edition of the Teachers on Fire Roundtable. I'm streaming everywhere I can and having these wonderful conversations, these learning conversations. So make sure to come on by. It'd be great to see you. Thank you again to each of you. I so appreciate you giving up some of your weekend to talk about instructional coaching with me. I hope this has been a rewarding conversation for you and look forward to connecting again soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.